welcome to the Cat Knits podcast. I'm Kat, or Catherine, and this is my monthly knitting podcast where I chat about all the knitting I've been up to in the past month and plans for the next month. I can't believe we are now done January. It's February, so the days are starting to get a bit longer. I was so happy when I was driving home from work yesterday and there was still daylight. I live in Vancouver, Canada, which is probably one of the southernmost parts of Canada and the most mild weather-wise, but we still do have the shortened days in the winter, and then we get the long ones in the summer, which is what we're inching towards right now. January was a good month, but I had a couple issues with some projects, which I'll show right now. I'll start with the first one. I've actually got a nice cup of hot water, so if you see me reaching over to grab something, I'm just grabbing that. Well, I like to make February my Finish It Feb, and I got this idea from Amy Smalls of Knit Collage. She has that yarn that's bulky for the most part and like very beautiful and gorgeous. She's got lots of patterns that are more kind of 70s patterns. Or at least that's, I find they're kind of more inspired by 70s. If you want to check it out, I've done a couple of her make-along, or I've done one of her make-alongs. I've done two of the designs, and I've enjoyed them both. So getting to it though, this month I like to finish everything. So this episode is coming out on a Saturday, but I'm filming it the day before on a Friday. And then on Sunday, what I like to do in the beginning of February is grab all the projects that I have. Actually, I grab all the yarn, all the projects, everything, and I put it on the kitchen table. And then I go through and I sort through my yarn. I might do a separate video about that. I haven't quite decided, but I have these two boxes. You'll be able to see the top of a pink box, which is behind me. And I like to make the pink box the projects that I want to focus on for the year. And then I have a second storage box, which is more like my backup box. So I kind of go through all my yarn and sort it, and I figure out what projects are left. I knew though that I've always wanted to finish this project. And this is the R Hoodie by Tanis Knits, and this was a lot of fun to make. So I made this in Noro yarn. It was their, I've got this written down, it was their Uchiwa, and it's color 7. So it's actually a 50% cotton, 20% silk, and a 30% viscose. So viscose is a wood pulp-based fiber. This is my first time actually knitting with cotton. I didn't love knitting with cotton. I found it very drying on my hand, so in that sense I didn't like it. I did find that this softened up a lot after blocking, and I absolutely love this pattern. So this is a bottom up, so you start at the bottom and then you do some double, you cast on some stitches here, or you not cast on, you create stitches, you double every stitch to make room for the pockets, and then you knit 2 together at the top to join the pocket back up. You do that for either side, and then you keep going up, and then you do the sleeves, and then you do like a raglan where you decrease and add the sleeves on at the same time. And because of that construction, this pattern had a million ends to weave in. It is absolutely adorable though. This is, I think, the 1 to 2 toddler size. And it's got a really fun construction for the hood where you, I believe you do some increases, if I'm remembering correctly, to make it a little bigger and to have this kind of shape here. And then you put all these stitches on hold. And then in the back here, you start doing decreases as you pick up the stitches that are on hold. So you don't do any short rows like a sock. Instead and that's why I think you kind of have, it still does actually kind of look like a sock heel, but instead you're just picking up and decreasing to get the shape. So I decided the only thing that was left, I finished this I think probably in about June of last year. I started it in March, so I figure at least I had it done probably within 3 months. And the last thing to do was to sew on the zipper. So last night I stitched on half the zipper. I followed a tutorial by Susan Bryant, which I'll link below because I really liked it. I stitched it on and I was all excited because I was going to do the other side, but I realized that I actually bought the wrong kind of zipper. So I bought a zipper that at the bottom, it doesn't allow you to actually open it up all the way. So this would be a zipper that you want to use on a bag, something like that, where you never actually want it to come undone. So then I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just chop off the bottom and see how it goes. But now the zipper comes off and I'd have to put in, I actually bought from Amazon these little stoppers, which I'll put a picture up of, because I am going to have to cut the zipper, so I want to put a little stopper up, but I have the wrong kind of zipper, and I purposely decided to hand sew this. You just basically go back and forth, and then I did a little bit of reinforcement at the top because I figure that's when you're going to be tugging it the most. But I realized that this was a bit of a fail. I'm going to have to buy another zipper. I might be able to order a zipper online, though that's exactly the length that I need. Now that I know how long I want to have it, I'm hoping I can just order the exact zipper so that I don't have to be frustrated by this. I also noticed another thing that I want to change since I'm going to change the zipper. I'll show you what the pattern looks like on my iPad, which has some cute. So this is what it looks like on, which is just adorable. And if you notice, oh, I can't zoom in, but the baby actually has a really thick zipper, like a zippers. I didn't realize this, but they have different numbers associated with different teeth thicknesses, and I chose a really fine zipper. So the teeth on my zipper are tiny. So I think since this is a baby project, well, it's a toddler, I'm gonna get like a really thick, might as well get an oversized zipper. So it was a bit of a win that this didn't go as I was hoping it to go. It's so funny though, because I bought this zipper probably like 8 months ago, or maybe 6 months ago. And then I've just been putting off actually finishing this garment. And then as soon as I tried to do it, I realized that that decision that I made 8 months or 7 months ago doesn't work. That's okay though. That's how knitting goes. I totally enjoyed knitting this little hoodie, and I would 100% knit another one. I'd love to knit another one in wool. It's a very popular pattern, so there's tons of projects to look at, and it's actually also an adult pattern. So she made it, I can't remember if you get the adult one with the kids one or not, but it's a very classic hoodie that's very comfortable and very fun to knit, and it looks like it really wears quite well too. So it's a great pattern. I enjoyed it. I recommend it. I'm curious to see how it actually fits on a little toddler. So because this is cotton, I'm hoping that this would be more of like a summer kind of jacket. So that was good. Oh, the story about this yarn. This is when I worked at the yarn store, and a customer came in because they bought this yarn to knit a gift for their sister, I believe. But she realized this was going to be her first project, was knitting this scarf. And she realized that she really didn't like knitting, so she actually just brought in the whole ball. They're 200-gram balls, and I was looking at projects that I could make with one ball, so I was able to make this whole thing with only one ball of the wool. So it's kind of fun. It was actually free yarn and very sweet. And I'm glad I was able to find something cute to make with it. It's my first hood and my first time doing pockets as well. And it was a cool design. It is finished with an I-cord bind off, just a heads up, which is, I don't know if you haven't done an I-cord before, it can be a little taxing because you knit this way and you slowly decrease. So it took a while because the I-cord is this whole entire length. So between the I-cord and all the ends to weave in, there is a little bit of pain in the project, but I think it turns out very well. So the other project I worked on that also was a bit of a fail was last time I showed these awesome mitts that I got as a gift for my mother-in-law. So it's the Lindal Mitten. They're these gorgeous garter color work short row with a Latvian braid mitts. They're quite complicated, and for that we got she gave us this yarn that we kind of looked at when we were at Rhinebeck. It's called Plied, and it's an American yarn, and it's called Plied because it's two different colors that are plied together. So this is the 50-gram hank, which is a fingering weight yarn that is the main color of the glove, and then there's all these bobbins, which are the, I think these are 20 grams, so 32 meters. They actually don't say how much they weigh. And you have all these bobbins, and that's what you do the color work part of the glove in. So there's actually 4 of us that are all working on these gloves together. It's the 4 of us that went to Rhinebeck. And I finished my glove, which I'm very happy with the way it looks. I think it's just absolutely adorable. The one thing is I'm kind of curious about is this point at the end. So you actually stitch this all together. And from the other projects on Ravelry, it doesn't seem to be too big of a issue. Like, it does seem to really blend in once you stitch it together. You almost stitch it. She's got a tutorial in the pattern like this, which brings it all together quite nicely. I probably spent maybe a week or 2. I would say this is probably 2 weeks of knitting from when I last showed this. So because it's, so you knit the top first in garter stitch, and you actually do a provisional cast on. So I cast on right here, and then you knit this way. And each of these sections are short row sections. And then you do kind of a double garter in your color work. And I decided just to do random choices of colors from the bobbin bag. So this is all knit with fingering weight wool, and I used a size 0 needle. And I ended up looking up afterwards, and I did get gauge. It is a one size pattern. And this is where the problem happens. So I was explaining, sorry, you knit all the way around. So you knit flat the whole glove, and then you kind of do almost like a garter stitch Kitchener to sew up here. And then you have these stitches live, and then you cast on new stitches here, also provisional cast on, and then you kind of knit again flat, and then you again Kitchener stitch up the glove. And that's how you get this glove shape from knitting flat. So there actually isn't a lot of ends to weave in the sense that although you're knitting it in the round, since you do all the seaming via Kitchener and provisional cast on, you don't have to pick up any stitches, and you can use the live yarn that you have to kind of do the seaming. You do of course have a lot of ends due to all the color work. Every single one of these is a different, you know, you're only doing 2 rows of color work. I was thinking about what I'm gonna probably do, because each color work section has 2 ends. So I was thinking of just tying some knots and then kind of cutting these rather than weaving them all in. That was my current plan. But then you see, once you have the finger, you do seaming here and then you knit down. And then there's some Latvian braids and some color work where you're gonna transition between all the colors that you used in the glove itself. So the glove itself, it recommends 6 colors. I think I decided to use 5 because I wanted to go for more of a low contrast rather than, I could add these punches of color, and I actually did end up adding, I think when I showed this to you last, I had added a punch of yellow to the glove, and I just decided that I just wanted it to be more low contrast, more centered. I actually realized I didn't talk about what I'm wearing. That's why I started talking, so I was thinking as I was talking there, I'll do that after I talk about this glove. So the unfortunate part, or the mistake, or I don't know what you call it, is I didn't try on the glove until I had finished it completely. I had an idea that it was too short when I was kind of lying it on my hand, but I was in denial. I was just hoping that eventually it would all work out. So the glove itself is too short and it's way too tight. Like my thumb is like getting crushed right now by the knitting. So I ended up texting about this in our group chat, and two of the other knitters have cast on. They both went up 0.25 millimeters. So this calls for a size 0, which a size 0 with a fingering weight wool, it was very stiff to knit, which is nice because it creates a very dense fabric, but it maybe isn't the most enjoyable knitting experience when you're using such a small wool, such a small needle with a thicker yarn. I did get gauge, so it is what the designer intended, because it does, you know, it does mean more warmth. But instead, what I am going to do, like everyone else, is I'm going to go up a needle size, and then they also actually experimented with adding extra length to this top portion to make sure it is long enough. I'm not sure if I go up a needle size, how that will affect my gauge. I might need to play around with it more. I don't know if I will need to add length as well, because I kind of need it to be about, you know, that much longer. So my plan is I'm going to keep this one so that I have a reference, but I'm going to cast on the next one up a needle size. So the point, I think it's 2.25 size. And then I'm going to see, once I do maybe like one, or maybe once I do these like 3 sections, I'll be able to lay the other one on top of this one and see how much my gauge has changed and if it's enough that I can continue knitting the glove, or if I need to go back and make some more adjustments to the pattern. If I need to add length, I'm hoping I can kind of tuck the length into these short row sections. So I would try to maybe increase in sets of 4 and then just do one more short row section per set of 4, which will also make the glove naturally, I think, a little wider, which would be good, because right now it's too tight. But this glove it's been a lot of fun to knit. I've been enjoying just watching it come together. It's such a unique construction. It'll be such a beautiful glove. I mean, it's so complicated. It's kind of fun that you get to do something so complicated on such a small scale. So you get to try out all these techniques for something without having to like do a whole sweater in it. So you kind of get to learn on a small scale. That's one of the reasons why I love baby knits and why I do so many of them, is because you get to try out, like for the R hoodie, I tried out a hood and the sleeves. I mean, not sleeves, sorry, pockets. And then for this, I'm just trying out like short rows and a whole other kind of garter stitch and a different kind of construction for gloves than I would consider. I've done only a pair of bottom-up gloves, which is the Tin Can Knits World's Simplest Mittens, which that pattern was a lot of fun. So if you're looking for a fun way to get started on maybe trying something new, is a baby knit or an accessory like a pair of gloves. My one thing is, as soon as I come across a problem like this where I'm gonna have to end up ripping it all out, is I like to put the project down and not think about it for a while. I find I get a little burned, maybe a little just need to take a break from the project when things go wrong. It also gives me really a break to think about how I want to make it work for me. I like to just give it some space, and that gives me time to really figure out what I want to do, and then maybe be a little bit happier with my second iteration. I think it will require a little more experimenting. Also now with the break, I think so there's 3, like I said, there's 4 of us that are all doing this pattern. I think 2 of the others are making quite a bit of progress, so I can see how theirs goes, and maybe with the adjustments to the adding the length and going up a needle size might help. I am a very tight knitter, so I think naturally my glove will be quite small. So that can play into it. So this was actually what I worked on at the very beginning of the month, and this is what I worked on at the end of the month. And they, you know, I kind of started my month with a bit of a problem, and then I ended my month with a bit of a problem. But that's what knitting is. It's more about perseverance and kind of, I like to think of it as just kind of going with the flow. And I honestly, I don't find it, like, it's not actually that annoying or frustrating. It's just like, darn it, now I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board and refix it. I view it as like a learning, it's part of the fun puzzle, is learning how all these construction techniques and how all these things kind of come together. The knits were kind of a very complicated project, and while a little bit near the end there while working on it, I made some progress on my 10 stitch blanket. So this is using another, oh, before I get into this, I want to talk about what I was wearing. So this is my Cozy Classic Raglan. It's by Jessie Made Designs. It's a pretty popular pattern. It's a top-down raglan. It's knit, the pattern calls for a fingering with a mohair or a DK yarn. I went with the DK yarn, but found a DK yarn that had mohair in it. So this is actually a BFL mohair nylon blend that was from a yarn store in Vancouver called Wet Coast Wools, and they sold it on cones. So this isn't something that you can really, the brand wasn't even there, it was just from Paris. So hard to find, but it came in all these jewel tones. This is when I first started knitting sweaters, and I really, for first started knitting in general, and when I chose yarns, I really just chose yarns that were very pretty, and pretty to me meant very like saturated in color, which is why this is a very bright sweater. I since then have switched to a lot more neutral colors because that's what I tend to gravitate towards in my wardrobe. I typically don't wear these like bright jewel tones. It has been fun though. I think too, since I dyed my hair this kind of like browny, a little bit coppery color. This color I think suits it quite well. It is a good pattern. I didn't make any modifications to it. I found it really well written. It does have short rows in the back. It fits very well. I was very happy with the fit. It is more of a fitted garment. It doesn't have a lot of ease. Like you can see, the sleeves are quite tight, and in that sense, it is just more of a fitted raglan. But it fits really well, and I've worn this quite a bit since I made this. I want to say I made this kind of maybe this is like a 6-month-old project, and the wear has turned out really well. I've washed it multiple times. I do think the raglan itself, I don't know if you're able to see that on the camera, is perhaps a little too deep for my depth of shoulder. So I do have a little bit of extra fabric. You know what? I will film myself wearing this, and then you can see what it looks like wearing it. I think I did modify the sleeves and the length to be a little bit longer, just because I tend to like longer sleeves and a longer length. Yeah, I think that's all I can really say about this. It's very warm. Mohair is surprisingly warm in my apartment. I don't think I'm gonna be able to wear this. This is definitely not a summertime sweater. This is a wintertime sweater. Mohair always surprises me how warm it is. This is my 10 stitch blanket, and for it I'm using Noro. I'm using Noro's Kureyon, which is an Aran 100% wool, self-changing color single ply. I really like Noro yarns in terms of working with them. I find they felt really nicely. They're really entertaining because of the color. They are though quite a statement in and of themselves. When you see a Noro yarn project, you know it's a Noro yarn project because of how distinct the yarns are. So this is quite, it's just quite loud in its own way. Last time I showed this, I had a little bit of project progress. This is actually another garter stitch. It's a very calm project. It's a very popular pattern on Ravelry, and it involves you cast on 10 stitches and then you knit kind of 10 garter bumps, and garter is considered a square stitch, which is why I will have a square blanket, because you kind of knit out from that center, then you do these corners, which are just short rows, and then you do another corner, and then as you go along your edges you knit 2 stitches together. And I'll link the pattern that I followed in terms of how to do this edge, that you have this kind of bump on this side and then this very smooth back. This is a modification on the original pattern. It's in one of the more popular, most helpful projects for this pattern. And I was actually surprised by how much yarn this project eats up. So this is almost 3 balls of the yarn, which is these are 50-gram hanks. This is one I've decided that I'm gonna go and return this color because it's very pastel-y, and I'm more liking, I even found like this section down here is too pastel-y and loud, and I'd rather kind of focus more on these like earthy kind of colors, which you see on that side of the blanket. I've used 3 different balls of yarn in this. So the first ball got me about 1 foot by 1 foot in the center, and then the second ball, let me see if I can figure out where the start of so the second ball started right here. Hopefully this is in frame. And I was basically able to do almost 1 full circle of the pattern. So let's see, maybe I'll lean back and then you can see the whole frame here. But I started up here, then I knit, oh oopsie, I'm going the wrong way. I started here and then I knit, I can't see, sorry. So I started up here, no, I started right here, and then I went like this, I went like this, and then I got kind of bright, and then I went all the way around, and I actually basically changed yarns right. Wait, what did I do? I just went around in a circle. Anyways, my point was that this one skein basically did 1 lap around the entire project. So by the time I started my 3rd ball, which is right here, I'm expecting that I'll probably only make it, so I'm here to here, and I've got, you know, maybe 1/4 to 1/3 of it left. So I'm imagining that I'll do a little over half using my 3rd ball. So by the time I get to my 4th ball, I'm probably gonna only, you know, I'm gonna be going around less and less. So the colors that I choose, the color changes will be more kind of happening within one span. And with that, I just want to be careful with what colors I'm choosing, because now they'll just kind of be a panel on one part of the blanket. And if I don't I need to start duplicating colors so that I have a little bit of a balance with seeing those colors somewhere else on the blanket as well, if that makes any sense. Like I said, I was surprised by how many balls this project is probably gonna eat up. I wanted to make, I think, about a 3 by 4 foot blanket, which means I originally thought that means that I need 9 balls of yarn, I think is what I was thinking. Like 9 balls, I think will get me a 3 by 3-ish. I think it's a little bit more than 1 foot by 1 foot that I get from each ball though, so I'm kind of hoping. Oh yeah, I just realized it's a square blanket. So if I want it to be 3 by 3, then I need 9 balls. Although I'll get it a little bit bigger than 3 by 3 because my first original square was a little bigger than like 1 foot by 1 foot. I wasn't anticipating that when I started the project, because I think each ball, I want to say, was around 10, maybe a little over $10 Canadian, which means this blanket is going to be like $100 blanket, which I was kind of hoping it'd be more like a $50 blanket. But goes to show you, you really should maybe look at what other projects are using, because this was a popular yarn for the project. It's been a very soothing knit. I've absolutely loved having this project there for when I'm just exhausted and just don't want to think. It's super short because you're only doing 10 stitches at a time each garter. So you really get to see that progress being made. Now, of course, as it gets bigger, it'll feel like the progress is being made slower and slower, because before I was doing, you know, one lap at least with like one ball, and now I'm going to start seeing only like half a blanket with one ball, or half a lap and then a quarter of a lap. So it will feel slower at the end, which is kind of, you almost want the opposite with the project. You want it to be maybe a little more work at the beginning, which, I mean, you know, maybe a little bit faster because then you have a little bit of hope, but you want to feel like you're really cruising by the end so that you don't lose steam. So I think I will be maybe losing a little bit of steam, but I'll try not to. But I need to go back to the yarn store because I'm going to return that color, and then I'm probably going to buy another 3 balls of yarn and just see how big it gets. But I could see this being a fun project. This will not be part of my finish at Feb because I'll have enough work to do finishing my other projects. But I will, this is kind of a really nice one just to have sitting there. And this made me think that maybe I would like to do the half and half scarf by Purl Soho. That's another extremely popular garter stitch pattern. That's a giant shawl. And linen quill is actually a pretty affordable yarn. They typically put it on sale quite a bit too. I started following their newsletter and I've now seen it on sale for Black Friday, and then it was just on sale again. The only issue is, of course, I live in Canada and they ship to the US. So I would just have to either pay to ship it to Canada and pay for the duty, or wait until I'm going down to the US for a trip and kind of go from there. So this has been a lot of fun and a great project. I now understand why people like to have one simple project always on the go, because I had those mitts which were quite complicated. So it's nice to just be able to have this project so you can just pick it up at any point and make progress on it and not really have to think too much. So my last project, which is the opposite of the 10 stitch blanket, and that is the Marie Wallin Unst sweater. So this was my gift to myself for graduating grad school. I've always wanted to do a Marie Wallin, how do I get this, there we go, Marie Wallin pattern, and I chose the Unst sweater. I wanted to do one of her cardigans, and I debated between a lot of them. There's a lot of other ones that are maybe, I would argue, a little more pretty than this one. Like this one is a little more, looks a little more dated, I would say, just because of the colors, but I like it. I kind of wanted something, I don't know why. I think that's why also with the Noro yarn, it was just a little bit, it's like a little more 70s kind of, it's not classically pretty, you know? It's got a little bit of edge to it. So I picked this up, and last time I showed my swatch, and I decided just to go with the colors because this is going to be my first Fair Isle on a large scale, and I think picking the colors is a little too much. I'm using the Jamieson, it's actually this yarn that's right here. This is the yarn that's called for in the pattern, and it is a Shetland wool. Shetland wool is more scratchy. It's non-superwash, so it will felt. And I think all the yarns that I've shown today are actually non-superwash, which means that they'll felt, and you shouldn't just throw them in the washing machine. Not that any of the projects, the Noro one will definitely felt, and that would be one I could see myself maybe not being as happy to hand wash a whole blanket. But anyway, so the felting is important for Fair Isle because typically you steek it. So this is the Jamieson's Shetland Spindrift. The pattern itself calls for 11 different colors, I want to say. They're 25 gram balls. They're nice and tiny, so you don't typically have too much left over, which is great. And it's 100% Shetland wool, as I said. These are actually, I believe, the sheep and the mill is on Shetland. And the Shetland Islands are kind of off the northeast coast of Scotland. They're like halfway between Scotland and Norway. So they are far, far away. I looked into it. I think it's like a 12-hour ferry. It's typically an overnight ferry from Scotland to get to Shetland, which is a group of islands. It's the birthplace, I believe, of FAIRISLE, which is this kind of knitting, which is where you do 2 colors and you do these. Typically they have some X's and O's in them, and you have these 2 colors and you alternate between them, and then you quickly swap out the 2 colors, which gives you all of these beautiful colors. So I knit this gauge swatch around Christmas time, and I was about a little bit tighter than normal than what Wallin is, which is very typical for me. I tend to go tighter rather than looser. And so what I decided to do was I actually went kind of up a size of the pattern. I tend to like looser garments anyways, so it kind of really aligned to knit the size up, so I ended up casting on a size medium. The other thing about the pattern though is it is knit back and forth, which back and forth color work just sounds like a recipe for misery. I've actually done it before, and I don't like purling because you have all the floats on that side, so you can't see the pattern as well. It's also not, I just find I'm not as fast when I'm purling, so I prefer to knit color work if I'm gonna do color work. So I ended up adjusting the pattern so that I could knit it in the round. Oopsie daisies. And I can steek it, so I'll end up cutting through the center of my sweater. And this is the progress I have made. I think I had a little bit last time to show, so I've maybe done maybe this much, maybe like 8 or 9 centimeters. 8 centimeters might be a bit generous. That's probably more like 5 centimeters, maybe 6. But I ended up, what I did was I cast on the number of stitches for each side, so the front, the back, and sorry, the left, the right, and the back. So I cast all those on and then I just put them all together. I did put stitch markers for where the back and the front were, just so that I had an idea of what was happening. And then I did this corrugated ribbing, which means that you're actually using a different color for the purl than you are for the knit. And corrugated ribbing, oh my goodness, was it time consuming. Like, to put it in perspective, so this probably takes me 3 times longer to knit a row than it would for me in the color work section. It was painful, so it was slow going, which is why once I got, like, I think I did this much color work in like 1 or 2 nights. So I typically knit every night for maybe an hour to 2 hours. Whereas I was working on this corrugated rib section for probably 14 nights. So it has been a slog. It was fun though, because I ended up learning how to knit, I think it's how to purl continental, I believe it's called. So that's where you hold your yarn in your left hand. So I wanted to, when I do color work, I hold the yarn one color in each finger, and then I pick the yarn and I throw. So I do a mixture. Let me just unknit that before I forget, so I don't have to undo it all, because I've already made one mistake and had to pull out the color work, which is painful. So I wanted to do something similar when doing the corrugated rib, because it was just really, really slow if I was throwing on my left hand arm. So I ended up watching a great YouTube video on how to do purling, and it worked out. So it's kind of interesting because you can see where I was learning. So let me find a section that actually makes this really obvious. There's one row in my band that is visibly worse. And that's where I started trying to learn the technique. Oh, I can't find, you know what? I can't find it too bad, which is actually a good sign. So you might be able to tell right there that there are some stitches that are quite bumpy at the bottom because they're quite loose. But then by the end, I really had figured it out. So it was a good excuse to learn something new. Corrugated ribbing, as you can see, it's really rolling. It's not lying flat, and it really has no stretch to it. So it's very pretty looking. I think it's a lot more dense. I'm curious to see, hopefully it'll block really well, or else I'll have to start looking at some options. A little siren going by. All right, the ambulance is gone. Yeah, so corrugated ribbing, so far my thoughts are curls up. It's pretty, but perhaps doesn't function quite like you want ribbing to. Like it's not gonna actually cinch in the garment at all. It's probably just gonna look good and add some structure to the bottom. The color work is so much fun. Color work is very addicting, especially with these charts where you're constantly changing colors. I do find Marie Wallin's charts are very dense. Like she uses a lot of symbols that are very similar and they're very tiny. So the charts themselves are not great. I don't find her patterns also have a lot of detail to them. For that reason, I would say they are more of like a, I don't know if I'd say they're advanced. What would be the moderate? They're not beginner friendly. They do require a little bit of patience and perseverance. She has her FAIRISLE club opening up at the end of this month if you're interested. And that always seems like a cool, there's a couple FAIRISLE club cardigans that I've wanted to make. But in order to get the pattern, you have to join the FAIRISLE club 1 year. I think she kind of alternates between a blanket and a cardigan. So this year is the cardigan if you would like to knit a Marie Wallin cardigan. There's a limited number of spots. I was thinking about joining, but I think with, as I'll find out in this weekend how many projects I have on the go, I think I probably should just focus on getting them done. So I joined, after I finished the corrugated ribbing, going back and forth, then I cast on the stitches for my steek. So I'm doing a 7-stitch steek, and then I started knitting in the round. And then eventually what will happen is I'll actually cut up through the middle of the steek to turn my pullover sweater into a cardigan. This sweater is a lot of fun. I'm now at the point where it's a lot of fun because I'm at the color work. It was quite painful when I was doing this ribbing, but this is also the reason why I haven't made much progress on the glove, because I switched from, I kind of have like one more complicated and one easy project. So my 10-stitch blanket right now is my easy project, and then this is my complicated project. But now I'm at the point where I actually can start seeing progress, which is just fantastic. It's hard with the corrugated ribbing. It was hard perseverance because there is quite a bit of it, quite a few rows, but I got past it. That was one of my goals this month, was to get to the color work. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about this book that I got for Christmas, which has been so much fun. I've just been spending the last month or so kind of going through it. It is a book about fiber on the west coast of Canada, which is where I live. So specifically, actually, it's Vancouver Island. And Vancouver Island is a pretty large island off the coast of Vancouver. By pretty large, I think it would take more than, maybe 15 or 16 hours to drive from the top to the bottom. Maybe even longer than that. So it's a big island, many hundred kilometers. And it has a little map at the beginning of the book. And it talks about all the different farms that are on Vancouver Island. And then it has wonderful photos of all the different sheeps and the farms themselves. So it goes through all the different fibers that are actually produced on Vancouver Island, a bit about how the fibers, the properties of the fibers, and then what farms sell those fibers. And I've just been kind of cruising through and looking at them. So a lot of them actually end up selling fibers on Etsy because they are just a little bit more of a, here, let me see if I can get some pictures of the llama. These are some funny sheep photos. So they sell a lot of the fiber on Etsy. A lot of it is, you get more of like a roving style. They do have some spun yarn, but it's just fun to read about all the different fibers. It goes through both wool and like both sheep, goes through, what are those called? I can't remember, but it goes through sheep, goat, llama, alpaca, and bunny rabbit. And then goat is where you get mohair and cashmere. And then it goes through the, okay, they're called cellulose. I haven't got to this part yet. The cellulose-based fibers, and those are like your plant-based fibers. So I think it's animal versus plant, actually, is the difference. And we have like a hemp, we have some, I think, hemp farms and stuff. Like I said, I haven't got to that part yet. But it's an absolutely gorgeous book if you are from the west coast of Canada and just interested in what yarn and wools we have available in Canada. I think I'm going to try, I've been kind of writing down some of the farms that look interesting, and I might try to get some, it's very breed specific yarn, which I've got a little bit into this year with the Long Way Homestead. So that's that calendar that I have there. It's my sheepy calendar, and I participated last year in their breed specific yarn of the month, which I haven't talked about, I think, in 6 months. And this February, this Sunday, I'm actually going to go through all those yarns and organize them and look at them and figure out what I'm going to do with them. So I'll talk about more about breed specific yarns, but I've been really wanting to get into it. BFL, which is this what I'm wearing, is a yarn that I love, a breed specific yarn, and I want to try out some other ones. Yeah, that was my January knits. I hope everyone is doing well and having had a good January. February, we got the leap year this month, and this is typically when I find it's the worst month for winter, but we get the longer days, and that's what makes it all okay. So happy knitting, and see everyone in a month. Bye. Woo!